Welcome to episode 219 of the Lone Hockey Podcast, where today we're going to be talking about some standouts in last night's matchup between Canada and Sweden for the Four Nations face-off. And it was a hell of a debut. It was really exciting to watch. There were a lot of really talented players on the ice for both teams, and I felt like coming into this game and with all the hype surrounding Canada, Sweden was actually a little bit underrated, and I wasn't surprised to see them eventually tie the game back up in the third. They crawled their way back into the game. I thought, yes, they were down and out early, and it kind of seemed that way, but throughout, I would say the second and third period, that's where Sweden really started to ramp it up and play better. And they really showed their camaraderie on line rush. They showed their camaraderie in the ozone. Their playmaking looked much more effective and complete. And they looked much more in sync throughout the second and third. I felt like when overtime hit, that's where Canada was really able to take their stride and really get better there too. And it was like every other shift you would have McKinnon, Crosby, McCarr, or Hagel, or Mark Stone, or so on and so forth. There's just so many guys and so many weapons that they had, and utilizing that in overtime. It was also really fun to watch 10 minutes of 3-on-3 overtime instead of 5 minutes. I don't think the NHL is going to change that rule anytime soon because of this, but it was certainly really exciting to watch and something a little bit different in that sense, and something that you can get more of a glimpse and taste of right now. So that was really exciting. And as for some standouts in Canada, like obviously it was like watching fantasy hockey on ice pretty much for Canada. You had your power play one unit was Reinhart, you had McCarr, you had McKinnon, you had McDavid, you have Crosby. Like those guys together was just unreal to watch, especially in the first power play of the game. William Nylander took an early penalty into the game, and that prompted that first unit to come out on the ice, and they were fresh. It was only not even a minute into the game that he scored. So that was a fresh unit that was out there too, and a fresh power play to have out there. So in terms of those four guys with McCarr, McDavid, McKinnon, Crosby, those guys, they really process the game similarly to one another. So the speed at which they make plays was so effective. And remember, you can always pass the puck faster than you can handle the puck. So the puck moves faster when it's passed versus when it's being handled individually. So those four guys, when they were zipping the puck around, it was just hard for Sweden to really cover and box out, and especially in man-on-man D-zone coverage. I noticed that Sweden early on in the game, they were trying to collapse a little bit more and try to play man-to-man, was not working. So they opted for more of a zone coverage throughout the game. And as the game went on, I felt like they were playing more of a zone D in terms of how they were structured on not only line rush, but also in zone defensively. And Sweden really adapted. I felt like their defense really adapted and got better as the game went on. Like Hedman, you got Gustav Forsling being a shutdown guy and also playing in the PK. You had Eric Carlson, who was offensive minded, but also really reliable as a puck mover, and some other guys that'll eventually come to my mind. I'm just forgetting them right now. And then up front, they had a bunch of guys rolling. It was Mika Zibanejad, William Nylander, Adrian Kempe. I thought Victor Arvidsson looked good, as I mentioned yesterday, in terms of him being a potential dark horse for this team. I liked Jesper Bratt. I liked Lindholm. I liked a lot of their forward group. I thought, oh, Philip Forsberg, hello. How could you miss him? He was excellent too. It was so fun to watch. And he was really good at controlling the outside. He got forced to the outside a lot, especially in line rush, which is something interesting to see, something rare to see. I feel like with Canada's bigger, more aggressive D, he was just naturally going to get forced to the outside a little bit more. But he'll adapt as the tournament goes on. He played an okay game. He was kind of steady. I didn't notice him a ton. I noticed him more throughout the back half of the game, I would say. So then for Canada, we mentioned their power play one unit, but I felt like the Tampa guys, when I remember they had a shift late in the game, very, very late in the game, they almost scored. It was Point with Cirelli and Hagel on that forward group line, and they rotated the D in and out, and eventually McKinnon came on the ice for one of the forwards. But that Tampa unit, because John Cooper was coaching them, obviously down in Tampa, and very familiar with them. And the chemistry was there when they were on the ice together right away. You could just see how late in the game they almost scored. They almost managed to control possession and get the puck up top or get the puck inside and be able to try to create a shot opportunity. It almost worked, but eventually we know Mitch Marner ended up getting the game winner in overtime, 4-3 victory for Canada. Just a hell of a game. Like there's so many guys who were so exciting to watch. It was surreal going into this game, knowing that we were able to see McKinnon, Crosby, McDavid, McCarr, all those guys play on the same team. And we've never seen that before until now, which is awesome. It's so cool for the game. It's gonna be so cool given that we're gonna have major events the next at pretty much every 2 years. You're gonna have 2026 Olympics and then World Cup of Hockey in 28, and it'll just kind of go back and forth between that stuff. So it'll be interesting to see how situations play out with not only this tournament but international hockey beyond this point. And we haven't seen Sidney Crosby play internationally for Canada in a while. Again, we've now seen McDavid, we've now seen McCarr, we've now seen McKinnon, and so many other guys in Canada really gel. And it was interesting too. Seth Jarvis was one of the guys that really stood out for Canada, and I was looking back at it and how just a few years ago, I believe it was 2021 in the World Juniors, he was one of the last cuts from that team, and now ironically, he's making the Four Nations roster. One of few players to make Canada's roster. So really cool story with him there. Obviously, a player who brought a ton of energy yesterday too in terms of forechecking, how he's cutting ice in half, and how he's pursuing pucks. And that's the style of game that he plays. He's going to be playing more of a checking role, I would say, throughout this tournament. And a lot more guys are. So it'll be interesting to see how that situation plays out with some of these guys who are more well known for being top players on their team. But for this tournament and for the next week or so, they're going to be checking style players. Travis Konechny was another example. Brandon Hagel's another example. Anthony Cirelli. And then even on defense, like you're gonna Travis Sanheim will draw in the lineup because Theodore is now out the rest of the tournament. He only played, I believe, 5, 6 minutes in this game, was out with injury, and now you're gonna get Travis Sanheim to replace him. So it's kind of a land of the riches when it comes to Canada, but Sweden to me is a really dark horse team. Like I feel like they're not talked about as much just because they're European and the Europeans in this tournament, especially because it's being hosted in Canada and Boston, they don't get as much credit and as much notice. But don't sleep on Sweden, and they got a really good team. They have a really good balance throughout their lines, and I really like their structure throughout their lines. And I would not be surprised at some point to see how Sweden could eventually get revenge throughout the rest of the tournament and try to stack up some wins and potentially work their way to a championship game. I would not be surprised at all. Sweden, they have a hell of a roster this year, hell of a team, both offensively, defensively, even in net. This is just a well-rounded team, and even though they lost against Canada in overtime, they still showed really well that they can keep up with this team. So, playing against Canada, arguably the best team in this tournament in game one, and for Sweden to showcase the effort that they did, that was really impressive to me. And like I said, I feel like Sweden's going to be a team that we see constantly evolve throughout the rest of the tournament, and they're going to have to evolve quickly because it's only a week left of this, and they're going to have to gel pretty fast if they want to stack some wins up and get to that championship game.